We've all been there, haven't we? You know, that moment you decide, okay, right, this is it, time for a real change. Maybe hit the gym 3 times a week, finally start eating healthier, perhaps pick up that guitar again.
Yeah, the big resolutions.
Exactly. But then, well, life happens. And it really feels like to actually make it stick, you'd need to be some kind of, I don't know, willpower ninja or something.
Totally. It feels like this huge mountain to climb.
Right.
Yeah.
And we could try, things kind of fall apart after a week or two, and you're left feeling like, what's wrong with me? Especially when you look online and it seems like everyone else is just, you know, effortlessly crushing their goals.
Well, what if that feeling, that that need for superhuman willpower, what if that's actually a clue?
A clue. How so?
Because the science, well, it actually shows us that lasting change isn't really so much about pure grit. It's more about understanding the architecture of our own brains, how they work.
Okay, interesting. So for this deep dive, we're going to unpack that. Really get into the science behind how we build and keep our habits. And I like this analogy you mentioned, thinking of your brain like a really dense jungle.
Yeah, exactly. It's full of potential pathways. Some are just faint little trails, maybe barely visible. Others are, you know, wide, well-trodden roads.
Okay, so the jungle.
And what's really fascinating here is that every single time we repeat an action, we're basically reinforcing one of those paths. We're stomping it down.
So a brand new behavior, like going for a run if you never run, that's like trying to hack your way through really thick undergrowth.
Precisely. It takes a lot of energy, a lot of focus. It's hard work initially.
But the more you force yourself down that same trail,
The clearer it gets, yeah. It's slowly transformed, maybe into a proper path, then, I don't know, a dirt road. And eventually, if you repeat it enough,
it becomes like a paved superhighway.
that's the idea. A behavior your brain can just execute almost automatically without much conscious thought. Effortless.
And these highways, they're efficient, right?
Yeah.
That's the appeal for the brain.
Hugely efficient. Our brains are fundamentally wired for efficiency, for conserving energy. So naturally, they prefer these established routes, these highways.
Which explains why breaking old habits, those really smooth highways and trying to build new ones, feels like, well, driving off-road through that jungle again.
Exactly. It's an uphill battle sometimes, especially when you think about how many of these, you know, really well-worn routes we've built up over years and years.
Okay, so these brain highways, they don't just pop up instantly. We often talk about routines versus habits. Is there a real difference there neurologically?
Oh, absolutely. That's a really key distinction to make. So a routine, think of it as a sequence of actions you carry out deliberately.
On purpose.
Yes, consciously, consistently, usually because you've learned it gets you a desired result, like following the specific steps in a recipe or setting your alarm, laying out clothes, that kind of thing.
Right. There's actual thought behind it. Planning.
Exactly. Routines are quite intentional. There's a part of your brain, often the prefrontal cortex, the planning, decision-making area, that's actively saying, okay, first we do this, then we do that.
You called it the wise planner before.
Yeah, let's call it the wise planner. It's analytical, strategic. It can look ahead and say, okay, this might be uncomfortable now, like taking a cold shower maybe, but it's good for me long term.
Okay. The planner sees the future benefit. So how do these very deliberate routines managed by the planner turn into those automatic habits, the ones where the conscious effort just seems to vanish?
That's the transition. When you repeat a routine consistently enough, especially if there's some kind of reward linked to it, however small, it can gradually shift from being planner-driven to becoming a habit. And habits are, well, they're different. They're sequences the brain learns to run automatically.
Like on autopilot.
Totally on autopilot. Often without you even being consciously aware it's happening. This automation seems to be largely handled by a different brain area, the basal ganglia. It specializes in locking in these sequences, so you don't have to consciously decide to do the habit. It just sort of happens.
And it feels like they're often kicked off by something specific, a trigger.
Yes, exactly. Triggers are crucial. Habits are typically initiated by these triggers or cues. They can be things in your environment, like seeing your running shoes by the door, or internal states like feeling stressed, or even just a specific time of day.
So the trigger is the signal.
It's a signal to the brain. Okay, time to run that habit program now. It's learn that association.
Can you give us some everyday example?
Think about automatically reaching for your phone the second you have a free moment, maybe waiting in line.
Guilty.
Right. The trigger there is the lull. the pause in activity. Or maybe pouring a glass of wine the moment you start cooking dinner. The act of starting cooking becomes the cue.
Or coffee and a biscuit mid-morning.
Perfect example. The coffee becomes the trigger for the biscuit habit. And what's really interesting from the research is that your initial intention to form a habit often matters less for long-term success than setting up really reliable environmental cues, those triggers.
Wow. Okay, so the environment is almost doing the work for you.
In a way, yes. It's prompting the automatic response.
So going back to our brain characters, if routines are the wise planner, what's driving these automatic triggered habits?
Well, if the planner is analytical, you could think of the habit system as being driven by something more impulsive. Let's maybe call it the impulsive toddler.
Okay, the impulsive toddler. I like it.
This system is highly sensitive to immediate rewards and familiar patterns. It sees the trigger, say, the coffee cup, and it immediately anticipates the reward it usually gets, maybe that sugary hit from the biscuit.
And this toddler doesn't care about my long-term health goals.
Not really, no. It's focused purely on what feels good right now or what's familiar and easy. It doesn't have that long-term perspective of the planner.
The impulsive toddler versus the wise planner. It sounds like they're constantly battling it out inside our heads.
Well, maybe more like negotiating. It can feel like a battle, for sure. But it's really important to understand that this toddler, this automatic habit system, isn't inherently bad. It's actually vital.
How so? It sounds like sabotage sometimes.
Well, by automating all those routine, everyday tasks like brushing your teeth, driving your usual route to work, it frees up the wise planner's limited cognitive resources.
So the planner doesn't have to waste energy on the mundane stuff.
Exactly. It allows the planner to focus on novel problems, complex decisions, things that genuinely require conscious thought. It's all about the brain conserving energy.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've got this this brain jungle, these ingrained highways run by the impulsive toddler, activated by triggers, and then the more deliberate routines managed by our wise planner. How do we actually use all this knowledge to make change feel less like climbing Mount Everest?
Right. The key really is to stop trying to fight your brain's nature with brute force willpower. Instead, you need to work with these mechanisms.
Work with the toddler and the planner.
Sort of, yeah. And the most effective way to do that usually is to forget the massive, sweeping changes overnight. Focus instead on making really, really small, almost ridiculously small adjustments.
Tiny steps. Back to the jungle analogy.
Exactly. Remember, even the biggest superhighways started as just a faint trail someone pushed through. You have to start small.
So these tiny, consistent steps are actually more powerful than trying to, overhaul your entire life in one go.
Absolutely. Because each tiny repetition, done consistently, starts to subtly reinforce that new neural pathway. It's like gently clearing that little trail day by day. You're signaling to your brain, hey, this new path, it might be useful. Keep it open.
Okay, all right, let's get practical. Down to brass tacks. Say I do want to build that exercise habit. Forget the gym 5 days a week for now. What's a truly small first step? Like embarrassingly small.
Okay, instead of the vague goal, work out more, make it incredibly specific and crucially easy to do. Something like do 10 squats every morning right after I brush my teeth.
10 squats. Okay.
Yeah.
That feels doable. Almost too easy.
That's the point. The barrier to entry has to be incredibly low, so low that your impulsive toddler barely notices or puts up much of a fight. It's hard to argue against just 10 squats.
Okay, 10 squats after brushing teeth. I can manage that. So what's next in paving this new squat trail?
The next critical piece is cementing that trigger. Create really clear and consistent triggers for that tiny action.
Like the after brushing my teeth part.
Exactly. That's a great trigger because brushing your teeth is probably already a deeply ingrained habit, a solid highway. You're basically putting a new exit ramp right off it.
Clever. Linking it to an existing highway.
Precisely. You can also add other triggers, maybe visual ones like leaving your workout clothes out the night before, or doing it in the same spot every day. The key is consistency. Perform the tiny action every time in response to the trigger.
So the trigger reliably leads to the action.
Yeah.
Brushing teeth means 10 squats.
Yes. The association needs to become really strong and automatic.
Okay, and then just keep doing it. Repetition.
That's the core of it. Regular, consistent repetition is how that tiny action starts to carve a deeper groove. It goes from a faint trail to a path, maybe eventually a road.
So initially, even those 10 squats will need a bit of the wise planner's nudge.
Oh, definitely. At first, you'll still need to consciously decide, okay, time for squats. But the decision gets easier because the trigger is doing some of the work. And over time, with enough consistent pairing of trigger action, maybe reward, the impulsive toddler starts to recognize the pattern. It gets involved. It becomes more automatic.
So consistency is key, even when I really don't feel like it, even if it's just those 10 squats.
Absolutely. Just do the 10.
Yeah.
And here's another really important layer to add, especially for habits that aren't immediately fun.
Like exercise, maybe. Or eating vegetables.
Oh. Yeah, things that don't have that instant gratification hit, unlike, say, scrolling social media. You need to consciously try and make the new action itself a bit more pleasurable.
How do you do that with squats?
Well, maybe you listen to your absolute favorite pump-up song only while you do your squats. Or you focus intently on how good and energized you feel for those few minutes after you do them. Even a small internal "well done" can help.
So you're kind of adding a little reward to keep the toddler part of the brain happy.
Exactly. You're making the experience itself more appealing, reinforcing the loop.
Okay, this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now the big question, the million-dollar question everyone asks, how long does it actually take for something like this, these 10 squats, to become a real automatic habit? Weeks, months?
Yeah, that's the one everyone wants a simple answer to. And the honest truth is, it varies a lot.
No magic number?
No magic number, unfortunately. Research like one well-known study from University College London found it can take anywhere from, say, 18 days to well over 250 days for a new behavior to feel automatic.
Wow, that's a huge range, 18 to 250 days.
Huge range. It depends on the person, the complexity of the habit, the consistency, the environment. Lots of factors. So the real key takeaway isn't the exact number of days. It's don't get discouraged if it feels like it's taking a while.
Right, don't expect it to be automatic in 21 days like you sometimes hear.
Exactly. Forget the myths. Just focus on being consistent with the small action day in, day out. Trust that the automation, that highway is being built, even if you can't feel it happening quickly. It will eventually get easier.
So keep showing up, keep doing the tiny thing, link it to the trigger.
That's the formula. You know, starting is often surprisingly easy. We get that burst of motivation.
Yeah, New Year's Day energy.
Right. The real challenge, and where most people falter, is maintaining that consistency over the long haul through the dips in motivation. That's where the habit formation actually happens. But, and this is crucial, it does get easier. The highway gets smoother.
So no secret life hacks, no quick fixes that just magically transform us overnight.
Afraid not.
But there is a science-backed approach. It involves understanding these brain mechanisms, the jungle, the highway, the planner, the toddler, and then using that knowledge strategically.
Exactly. Working with your brain, not just trying to overpower it. Building those pathways, one small, deliberate step at a time. And the good news is, this works at any age. You can always build new trails.
Okay, fantastic. Let's try and bring this deep dive toward a close then. If we boil it down, the core message seems to be, forget the dramatic overnight transformations. Lasting change really comes from starting with incredibly small, almost laughably easy actions.
Yes. Manageable actions.
Linking those actions tightly to really clear, consistent triggers.
Crucial step.
And then just repeating them consistently, day after day, letting those new neural pathways slowly strengthen until they become automatic habits.
That's the essence of it. And remember, every single tiny step you take, even if it feels insignificant in the moment.
Like just 10 squats.
Like just 10 squats. It is a positive step forward. It's progress. Think of change less like a destination you have to reach immediately and more like a direction you're consistently heading in.
A direction, not a destination. I like that. It takes the pressure off a bit.
It should. Any positive change is better than none.
Absolutely. Okay, so to leave everyone mulling things over, here's a final thought for you. Thinking about all this, what's one genuinely tiny, ridiculously small action you could realistically take, maybe even starting today? Something that feels almost too easy, but that would nudge you just a single step closer toward the change you'd like to make in your life.